The Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and your local cable provider presents Cable Reports. Join us now as Cable Reports brings you up to date on current issues facing the Commonwealth through discussions with your local legislators and other policymakers from across Virginia.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports and Comcast, connecting Virginians to their government. And we want to welcome two members of the General Assembly who represent the Culpeper area and surrounding jurisdictions. Delegate Mike Webert, good to see you, sir.
Good to see you too, sir.
Delegate Ed Scott, Chairman of the Agricultural Committee. Good to see you, sir.
Good to be back with you, Woody.
I don't think people realize how important agriculture is to the state of Virginia. As a matter of fact, I believe farming and timber are the two biggest industries in the state.
When you combine agriculture and forestry, that's exactly right. We call it Virginia's #1 industry. Clearly, it's part of our history and our tradition. It is a significant land use, but a major economic force all across the state.
So what kinds of legislation are you considering generally this year, 2014, that's important to those industries?
We've had, as usual in the committee, a wide range of issues, looking at everything from predator control to environmental issues. We also, of course, we have jurisdiction over some of our fisheries management in the committee and other issues dealing with hunting and fishing. So we have a wide range of issues that come before the committee, and we're very fortunate. We have a good, strong committee, folks like Michael who understand agriculture, who want to be on the committee, so it's a really good group to work with.
Delegate Weber, you bring a wealth of experience as a result of your background and training. You are a farmer. You operate a fairly large farm, as I recall. Tell us about the operation of farming in the Commonwealth and why it's so important.
Well, as Ed, the chairman put it, it is our #1 industry. It's also one of our biggest exports as well. And Todd Haymore and our previous administration and the future administration, I'm sure, are going to be focusing on that. And essentially, as a farmer myself, my full-time operation, we farm about 3,000 acres, mostly commodity farming, corn and soybeans, and we grow Angus and Hereford cattle, and we sell our bulls across the country. But essentially, in the valley, in the Shenandoah Valley, once the breadbasket of the South, you have a large chicken industry, you have large cattle in the Southwest, and once you get outside of Northern Virginia, agriculture is still by far one of the biggest industries, and also one of the industries that helps holds our communities together. And that's why it is imperative that we do the work that we do in the General Assembly and that the administration does in furthering those exploits, and especially with the location of where our port is and the depth of our port, we can take advantage of some of these things and really grow Virginia agriculture in general.
Now, you're also a member of the Business Development Caucus, as I recall, and I know that you're a leader in that group, and there's legislation that that group is pursuing yet again this year. Talk to us a little bit about some of the issues you are promoting.
Well, there's a couple of issues that we're promoting. As you know, the workers' comp is always an issue. We're carrying a bill. It's HB 52, and essentially what the bill does is for an a company whose business the automobile is not integral to their business, so a roofing company, not a taxi cab company. If that company, say they were on their way to a job site and they get into an auto accident and it's a third party at fault, so they get rear-ended at a stoplight, their EMR rating or their mod would not go up. And essentially what we've had now is, because workers' comp is a payout system, because it's not their fault, but because workers' comp is paid out, their EMR goes up. Well, for a lot of commercial companies, the EMR rating is used as a filter for these companies, and they are losing business. We have a roofing company that's probably lost millions of dollars in business because of this. And so we're working with the SEC on the language of that bill, and hopefully we can move it forward to help small businesses across the Commonwealth of Virginia.
So they won't be penalized for something that was not their fault.
Exactly.
Tell us a little bit, Delegate Scott, about Culpeper County, what's going on, the economy, businesses that you're dealing with, legislation that may help businesses there.
Woody, as you know, I'm a native of Culpeper. Grew up there. I live in Madison County now, but Culpeper continues to be a very diverse community, diverse in its economy, small business based, agriculture and forestry based, but always looking for new opportunities as well. Whether it's the renaissance that's occurring downtown, or more recently we've seen a new manufacturing company come to Culpeper, a company called Tandem Motors. And they're developing a pretty unique new vehicle, and I've had the opportunity to work with them now the last 2 sessions on some legislation that just helps that company get up and running. This year's legislation, which has passed the House, is actually a very positive collaboration with DMV and with related agencies across the country, and we've actually created a definition for the vehicle that they make. It's called an auto cycle, and we're establishing a framework so that there will be uniform rules for these vehicles across the states. This is good for the manufacturer, it's good for their dealers, and ultimately good for their customers. And it's fun to work on legislation like this that you hope down the road just helps a local company grow and expand the number of jobs that it can create.
Absolutely. You mentioned the Port of Virginia, and I think it's going to become even more important. There's some things going on at the Panama Canal, I believe, that you're aware of. Talk to us about that and the impact on the Port of Virginia.
Well, the widening of the Panama Canal is going to have a huge impact on Virginia, as currently we have a very deep port where these larger ships can dock, and our infrastructure in the Commonwealth with our railways and things will vastly help Virginia's economy. However, we are in competition with our neighboring states. We're in competition with South Carolina and a few other states who are in the process of dredging their ports to allow bigger boats to come in. And so I think just because we're right in the middle, I mean, as they say in the real estate industry, location is everything, and we're right in the middle on the eastern seaboard. We can ship north, we can ship south, and we really do, as a Commonwealth, need to take advantage of that location as well as the natural depth of our port. And I believe that can be a huge factor in Virginia's economy moving forward.
And of course, Delegate Scott, that's all important as well in relation to the military installations that we have throughout the state, but more importantly, of course, down in the Hampton Roads area. I know that's not in your district, but everyone recognizes how important the military is to the Commonwealth.
We see that all across the Commonwealth in terms of the impact of military spending, the related businesses, and it's why when we go through some of the periodic efforts in terms of base realignment, Virginia's been very actively involved. It's one element of the work that we did last year to create the FACT Fund to be prepared for some of the unintended consequences of sequestration and federal budget cuts. But you're exactly right. The port impacts us in so many ways, and Michael touched on it in terms of agriculture. I had the opportunity last summer to go down to Chesapeake when there was an announcement about an export sale of additional soybeans to China, and the point that I made that day was, yes, we're standing here in Chesapeake, but when we can sell more soybeans to China, that improves the prices for farmers in Culpeper, Fauquier, Orange, Madison. So it really, the port's impact carries all across the Commonwealth. Obviously brings a lot of merchandise into us, and if we can effectively and efficiently bring that in to our retail channels, there again, it's advantageous.
And of course, we have a number of members of the military who have returned from theaters of war recently. I know that we want to encourage them to become entrepreneurs. We want to make it easier for them to deal with the State Corporation Commission, its rules and regulations. What's being done for veterans?
Well, the General Assembly and the Republican caucus in general have a number of different things for veterans, but my favorite is our V3 program, which they funded the year before I got here, which essentially for veterans, it's a stream of companies got together, they've come together and they said that they will hire veterans. And what that particular organization does is it trains these companies to find the veterans that they need. So, for instance, in the trucking industry, you've had a soldier who in Iraq's been driving hazardous materials around. He's been well trained in handling all of these things, but when he comes to the United States, he's not certified to drive these trucks. And so when he's looking for a job, he'll go through and it says, you need hazmat certification or this or that certification, but he doesn't necessarily have those, but he's more than qualified. And so what the V3 program does is it teaches these companies to go out and find the soldiers that they need or the employees that they need to fill those slots. And that, I think, I was talking to one of my mechanics is a Vietnam veteran. He did 2 tours in Vietnam. And he said, Mike, when I told him about the V3 program, he said, Mike, that is a significant change in how we treat our veterans from when I was a veteran in Vietnam. He said it is phenomenal that the Commonwealth of Virginia has stepped forward and said, we want you to come back here, be very productive members of society, and welcome you with open arms, compared to what he experienced when he came back from Vietnam. And he said that is a testament to the Commonwealth of Virginia and the work that we do in the General Assembly.
And what about making sure they get the education they need? I think that they are deemed residents once they return for tuition purposes.
We've tried to do a number of things to facilitate, as Michael alluded to, through the V3 program and some other ways, just facilitate entry into targeted workforce training. Our community colleges are very well equipped to take this on. We also, of course, look for the private sector partnerships so that we know there's a job waiting at the end of whatever education or certification is there. And oftentimes it's really because of that experience in the military, because of the training that went with that experience, we're talking about a minimal amount of investment in education and certification, but it can be critical to truly landing that good job.
So the transportation funding bill was passed last year. It's being implemented throughout the state. What critical needs exist in your respective districts? I'll go with you first.
One of the things that we have kind of highlighted, started talking about last session, was the need for the interchange in Culpeper at Route 29 and Route 666, where Eastern View High School is located. We've been fortunate there. We have not had serious problems, but nonetheless, for safety reasons, we need that interchange built. We're fortunate we've got the funding, and our focus now this year is to look at projects and decide how best we can utilize the taxpayer dollars and pick projects that really make sense. And the formulas that we're looking at are not going to be a one-size-fits-all formula, but will allow by transportation district the establishment of criteria. And so clearly in Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads, congestion mitigation is going to be a high priority. You come back to the Culpeper district, safety or economic development are going to be most likely the high priorities, which makes that interchange fit. It clearly is a safety project, may also down the road have some positive benefits from an economic development standpoint. So we're moving forward, fortunate to have the funding, but focused on being sure that the dollars are spent appropriately.
Now, what about other areas in your district as well? Are there any critical transportation
Absolutely.
funding?
There's always a need for transportation dollars for certain things. For instance, in the town of Warrenton, we've got our Broadview project to help speed up some of the congestion actually in the town, as well as we're in the process of conducting a study on the 17 bypass. But also in the town of Front Royal, we've got bridges that are absolute need of replacement, and as big as those bridges are, they're going to be quite costly. So we've got various projects that we need to look at, and as Ed alluded to, we need to look at the metrics at which we use to determine the need of these projects.
Glad you mentioned Front Royal, because I've always been puzzled by a sign there that says inland port right off of Interstate 66, and I take it that's part of the distribution center that comes up from the Port of Virginia and others.
Absolutely. That's a perfect example of Virginia's infrastructure. For instance, the inland port is essentially where trucks come, and then their cargo or their trailer is then loaded onto the railway, and the railway is then taken down to the port. Essentially, that's the easiest way to describe it. And so it is essentially an inland port for the trucks to go and distribute their wares. And that type of infrastructure is key to the Commonwealth of Virginia and the use of our port as we move forward, especially now as we get back to the widening of the Panama Canal, right, and our direct line to China now.
A couple of lingering aspects of the transportation bill. One relates to hybrid vehicles. Apparently that $64 annual tax is going to get repealed. We still have, however, the need for the Congress to act apparently on the Marketplace Freedom Act that was to fund part of it. What happens if the Marketplace Freedom Act is never enacted into law?
by the strict wording of the legislation last year, then there is an increase, additional increase in fuel tax. We've still got some time. Conversations are still going on with our congressional delegation to encourage them to move that forward. We're fortunate one of the key players in that legislation will be Judiciary Chairman Congressman Goodlatte from over in the 6th District. He has, according to conversations that I've had with some other members of the congressional delegation, expressed a willingness to work on a bill. His committee has a pretty full plate right now with some other issues like immigration, but hopefully they'll find a way this year to take a look at that, and because that really could be one more boost to our efforts to not just have more dollars for transportation, but to have a funding stream for transportation that makes sense in the 21st century.
And of course, that legislation would allow the Commonwealth of Virginia and other states to tax out-of-state retail internet providers, would it not?
Yes, it would, and I think especially for some, it's a fairness issue. If you're going to do business, many of the folks that do business in the Commonwealth have their retail shops, do pay taxes, and those that in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and those that don't, many folks feel that it's a fairness issue and they should pay the same taxes that the Virginia residents pay.
Sunday hunting looks like that may pass this year. Tell us what you're hearing from your constituents. There are two sides to that story, of course, and I'm sure you've heard both.
And actually, you have two sides of the story sitting here today.
Good.
The chairman, that is one issue that the chairman and I, politely disagree upon. In my district, it's a 50-50 spread between the folks that are for and the folks that are against. And of course, you can see things from both sides. As a private property owner myself and an avid hunter, I'd always love to have another day to take my son out and explore the woods. And there are also those folks who want to explore the woods without having to worry about the imposition of the hunting. However, for me, at least on private property, seems to be a pretty good compromise. We do not want to open up our public lands at all to Sunday hunting, because the folks that pay the taxes that use our public lands should have every right to use them as well. And so I feel that that's a pretty good compromise on private lands. And we will see. There are 44 other states that have it, and it doesn't seem to be a problem, but we can always address the issue going forward.
Let me hear from Mr. Chairman.
Well, Michael's exactly right. When you have an area like ours, we have constituents on both sides of the issue. And while Virginia was becoming part of a relatively small list of states that did not allow hunting on Sunday, there was kind of a tradition that where we have this very civil way in which we share the hunting resources. We recognize that people want to go out and occasionally do other things in the woods, and so we set aside Sunday. There also was a concern, a lot of our hunting habitats becoming increasingly fragmented, and the fact that you are doing something safely on your own property does not mean you may not be in jeopardy from bullets on another property. But we're at a place in Virginia today where, particularly not so much in our areas, but in the urban and the suburban areas, legislators are hearing from folks who feel like they have a full work week. They want the opportunity to hunt. And so I think what we're really seeing is one more example of how Virginia's changing, how our legislature reflects the changes of the urban and the suburban voices. And so I expect the legislation will move forward this session. We'll monitor it, see if we've set up the proper parameters. Michael touched on the issue of public lands and setting those aside for other uses. If somebody wants to ride a horse, take a hike in the woods, we may need to establish some further perimeters around those public lands, just because particularly in the case of the equestrian trails, those have historically been designed around the boundary of the property to maximize the usage. So we may, I think the issue will continue to evolve, and hopefully knowing the fact that most of our hunters are still respectful of others, hopefully we'll have minimal conflicts and we'll see the issue move forward.
Now, there are conditions. You have to have the written consent of the owner. You can't hunt with dogs, I believe, as well. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, I think that was also a major contentious issue in regards to property rights as well, because obviously with hounds sometimes they don't tend to listen to their owners and they'll wander onto somebody else's property. So I think that concession was made for that very reason, is we don't want to. That particular type of hunting tends a lot of times to infringe upon other people's private property, and that person should have every right to enjoy their property the way they see fit.
Great. Let's turn our attention to the school system, especially K through 12. We have the standards of learning. We have a bill that was passed last year, which apparently has upset some local school districts. It would allow the state of Virginia to take over a failing school district. And we also have a bill that would require schools to be graded A to F. What are you hearing about those from your constituents?
Well, to be honest with you, Woody, there are, again, as with Sunday hunting, there's two sides to every issue, but I firmly believe, like a colleague of mine who used to be my office mate, Algie Howell, education is going to be the next civil rights battle that we face. America is the land of opportunity, and for us to take advantage of that opportunity, we need to provide our students with a great education. And that is one of the reasons why, at least in the Commonwealth of Virginia, we're addressing SOL reform. Part of the reason why the OEI bill was put forward is because the school system that it is supposed to address, you have 3 generations that have gone to a school that has not been accredited. That is 3 generations of folks that have not received the same type of education as the constituents in my district, and I feel that we should make every effort to ensure that they have a good, solid education. And one of the things that we can do is the OEI bill, as well as making sure that our schools are graded so that people can see and it's very clear as to where the school stands. But I also think that with our SOL reform that we are trying to undergo this year, it is something where we've over-standardized our students, and we're not giving our teachers the ability to actually teach, to go in depth, to teach the critical thinking that our students need. And so I think by the House addressing SOL reform this year, it's going to be a great benefit to our schools. I've spoken with my superintendents, and a number of them love the bill as we're moving forward. We're going to create a commission that constantly looks at SOLs, and we're going to hopefully reduce the number of tests that our students will take so that it will free up our teachers and have them doing what they love to do, which is teach our children.
So, Doug, it's got too much rote memorization, too little critical analysis is what I'm hearing in terms of the standards of learning.
That's been the criticism over the years, and I think even beyond saying too much rote memorization, I think we found as we back up and look at things in places where we simply have too much testing, multiple choice type testing, and so there's some places where we probably can test a little bit less frequently, but we also, looking down the road, are seeing some updates in technology that can allow us to test for the critical thinking, and so we're not backsliding on accountability. But we're taking a periodic look at the total package, and we're talking about an idea that there are a lot of details, a lot of things to work out. But I think the General Assembly's got the potential for this to be really one of the bipartisan successes. One of the places that the legislature and the administration are going to agree, and one of the places where we're going to have a lot of support back home from teachers, school boards, superintendents, and students.
You mentioned new technologies. Apparently there's a move afoot to provide students an even greater opportunity that's at the level of our institutions of higher learning now, but virtual learning, virtual classrooms that they can take advantage of through computers or TVs that are resident in the classrooms, teachers from remote location. Talk to us about that opportunity.
The technology's clearly there. We've struggled in the last couple of years in trying to figure out exactly who should be in charge of that. Do you have some benefit by maintaining that at the state level and spreading those costs there, versus our tradition where we say, in education, decisions made at the local level are typically the best decisions. So we've got some details to work through, but the technology is clearly sitting there. The technology companies are investing because they want an educated workforce for the future. So there's some interesting opportunities in the area of virtual learning.
What about the need to assist those who graduate high school but don't, for whatever reason, decide to go to either one of our great junior colleges or institutions of higher learning, but could benefit from a vocational educational environment?
The CTE programs that are, at least the schools that I represent, are absolutely fantastic. One of the things that we've worked on is, and I presented a bill to hopefully be part of the SOL package that we're putting forward, that essentially directs the Department of Education to do what they're currently doing, which is take a list of industry certifications in place of SOLs. But what we're doing is we're asking the localities to say, so for instance, in Culpeper and in Fauquier, healthcare is a big industry in our area, and we would like, say, their nursing certificate to take the place of one of the SOLs, so that these students, when they take their industry certifications, they're obviously, they're capable of critical thinking, they're capable of math skills, and so they hopefully will go into these job-ready programs.
Right.
And for instance, in the Commonwealth, or in Fauquier County, our mechanics program, we've gotten a great electricians program. These kids come out certified and ready to start their apprenticeships, so that they come out job ready. And that's the key that we need to do, is make sure that our children, when they graduate high school, they can find a job.
Got about a minute and a half left, but there's still a huge issue left. Probably can't cover it, but I do want to get your comments on Medicaid expansion. You talked about some of the issues that both the new administration and General Assembly can work together on. This one is more contentious.
Well, the House of Delegates is working on a position that says we've got to have some reform in terms of the existing Medicaid program before we can even contemplate expansion. We have a very healthy and I think justifiable skepticism about the federal government's promise of additional funding for Medicaid for an expanded population. And we're seeing on a daily basis that the Affordable Care Act is having impacts well beyond just our Medicaid population, our hospitals, and other health care providers. It's impacting individuals. It's impacting small businesses. The federal government's going to have to take an additional look at this, which creates uncertainty for us, difficulty to make long-term decisions. That's the approach we're taking to the House. This is a long-term decision. Let's do it properly. Let's be the best advocate for the taxpayer dollar that we can possibly be. And then hopefully down the road we have improved health care outcomes for all Virginians.
So continue the work of the Medicaid Innovation and Reform Commission, I take it.
Absolutely. We need it. There's a lot of waste that goes into the Medicaid program, and we really need to work on making sure that we make the best use of the taxpayer dollars. And as Ed alluded to, the federal government's ability to necessarily keep their promise on paying 100% or even 90% moving forward is going to be a significant challenge.
Thank you both for being here, Delegate Ed Scott, Delegate Michael Webert. Good to see you.
Woody, good to be with you.
Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Comcast, connecting Virginians to their government. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans.